everyone, it's Paulie here. Yay! Pride flag behind me because that's why. And a unicorn glass, the symbol of my people. So, I've been looking for some solo board games because some very good ones coming out. Found a very cool one. Worthington Games. Worthington Games do some great stuff. I am a huge English Civil War fan. In fact, my degree is in English Civil War history. Wackily enough, for an Australian, I've walked a great many sites, and I've got a couple of sets of armour out the back. But, cruel necessity. This is a solo game of the English Civil War, and it's a really good one. A really good one. It's got its basis in an earlier two-person game, which I also have, which is great. But how this works, you are playing Parliament, obviously. God and republicanism. And you are here to save England from the horrors of authoritarian government and the complete lack of rule of law that is represented by the monarchy. So, you must keep control of London, and you must kind of try and win the hearts and souls of the nation in order to establish a God-fearing republic. So, it's really rather cute. You've got these tracks, these political tracks. You must keep track of its the spread of and strength of Catholicism, which also represents essentially foreign interference in British foreign policy and political life. Essentially, the French will be running you if Catholicism is allowed to really get a hold. Puritanism, and those two oppose each other on the track. Monarchy and republicanism, who also kind of oppose each other on the track. But these are these four things that you have to keep a track of. As you advance the cool stuff, you increase in your zeal, and as you kind of lose out on the cool stuff, well, you don't get as much zeal. You lose the game if republicanism and puritanism bottom out, and monarchy and Catholicism reach the top of their list. That's it. Game over. Bang. Woe is England. You've become a you become a minor little state, and we don't get French and American revolutions. That's how that works. But what you have is a simplified map of jolly old England. And this is split into regions. There are regions where armies are operating. So as you can see, the rule book's actually it's fairly slim. But yes, so you've got your armies. There's an army of the north, which is sort of Oxford and heading up towards Scotland. There is a Scottish army, there's an Irish army, and there is the army of the west. And there are different zones within these. So pretty simple. Oops, pretty simple board. But you can see it's like no, it's not paper. It's proper fold-out boards. So at the start of the game, different armies ranked against Parliament are all sort of in the outer zones of their different regions. There's a big random deck. Now, there's two ways of playing it. They say you can take the deck of events and you can shuffle it. Or they have a numerical number in them. You can keep them in numerical order, and this will be the series of events as they actually happened in the actual war. Up to you which way you want to play. You are, of course, playing 3 civil wars because there was 3 civil wars. For those of you who aren't cluey, so brief potted background. The Stuart monarchy became exceptionally despotic and were incredibly anti-parliamentary and began to subvert laws in order to use the judiciary as a political weapon to crush down their opponents. They essentially negated Parliament because the king had to call it, he just didn't call it, and only Parliament can raise taxes. So what the king did was began essentially issuing fines and awakening these old rules that allowed him to pull emergency funds out of various ship money, for instance, which was there as an emergency measure against the Spanish Armada. And so it was a despotic rule, and then he finally, it looked like the Scots were going to invade south. He had to raise Parliament to get a tax, and the moment Parliament was in, they started passing laws to redress all these terrible injustices. The king tried essentially busting in and arresting them. Parliament essentially was supported by all the local apprentices, and the London trained band's militia were, no, these are Parliament's boys. Yeah, they ran the king and court out of London. He fled north, raised his standard, and up at Nottingham, and voila, we have English Civil War. A war was fought. Parliament won. They get Charles, and Charles begins to machinate with the Scots, and essentially runs a deal which says, you guys are Presbyterian, and you're really keen on the place being Presbyterian. I will make England Presbyterian if you invade and reinstall me as king. After all, the Stuarts came from Scotland, so, you know, I'm kind of Scottish too, right? So, yes, he essentially machinated for a foreign invasion of England. The parliamentarian forces beat that back, and that's when they said, right, we're killing him. What? He is a traitor. He is a traitor to England. He organised a foreign invasion of our soil in order to impose a foreign religion on us and, you know, essentially make us slaves. Yes, trial, treason, chop. The Americans. Oh, you can't convict a former head of state. Laughs in Oliver Cromwell. Laughs in Robespierre for that matter. But and then there was the Third Civil War, where the dead King Charles' son tried to invade, backed by the French court, and a ton of money came over and tried to sort of raise the counties and so on and make a third civil war and take it over. And no, he had the living shite stomped out of him as well. But so you do have 3 civil wars to go through. Each one has its own decks. So the decks are turned over, and that will tell you that one or other of these armies is trying to advance. If there is a fortress which they do not control in that area, they will try laying siege to it. They roll a couple of dice. You've got these nice kind of like rotating counters that show how the defense is being whittled down. If they whittle it down to 0, ta-da, they take it and it becomes theirs. If you control the fortress, you can start repairing it or rebuild it, or you can actually improve it. Oxford is very important. That's the royalist capital, and it's the joining point between a couple of their armies. It's also a bit of a launching point where they can come down to London. So you can, when it's your turn, you have zeal, which is your currency that you've got to use. You have a set amount of zeal. You can spend zeal to do things. You can campaign in an area, north, south, whatever. If you can get to it, you can try campaigning in Ireland and so on as well, because there's the Irish troubles going on as well. There's actually a war being fought in Ireland between the Protestant colonists and the Catholic natives, which kind of helped trigger off this whole thing in the damn first place. But as the Catholics there become triumphant, they start sending people down to assist the royalists. So you kind of got to keep fueling the fight against them, otherwise Irish units come over and assist the royalists. So you can campaign and you roll various dice depending on the strength of the armies coming against you. You can spend zeal on other things. You can spend zeal points on affecting pretty much any dice roll. You can spend zeal points on a zeal counter, which gets placed on particular units in battle. More about battles in a bit, which makes them function more zealously. You can also use zeal to do virtually anything, fortify, raise troops, but most importantly, you can expend zeal to try and change those political counters. You can spend zeal to force counters up and down. There are also sort of action cards which come up, actions and abilities. 3 little slots. As each turn happens, you deal out a card. You can only have 3 of the slots on the board filled with abilities that you can still get. So if you've got 3 of these slots filled and you bring in a 4th, you have to decide which of the 4 you're discarding and which one you're keeping up there on the menu so that they're possible for you to be able to buy. You use zeal points to purchase these, then they come down and they're a thing you can do. Those can be the ability to raise named units, which are important, to raise troops, or some of these things will be sweeping new things like the self-denying ordinance, where Parliament, when Parliament first started out, basically everyone that was an MP suddenly pretty much found themselves kind of a general or trying to do something. I'm going to raise troops, I'm going to raise funds. Well, I think a true man shall be forth there in the army. Oliver Cromwell was the just the MP for Huntingdon. So, he just raised cavalry from, his local area and around Cambridge. And, that was his troop. He was leading them. Parliament actually did a rather magnificent thing, and they passed a power limitation on themselves, the self-denying ordinance, which says you cannot be a serving member of the civil government and be in the military. We want a separation between the military and the gears of state. They meant well. Okay, the tragedy of the English Civil War is that these fantastic things were tried, and essentially horrors of circumstance and the naked ambition of men meant that these things failed. But this idea of a separation between army and the civilian state, this later becomes like a key point in Western democracies and so on, and our current democratic system. When that fails, when you've got a military junta, well, we've seen how well that works. So yes, so you can do things like this. And what does this do? Well, it actually pushes your zeal up, because the populace is very keen on this, because it shows you're not just like power mad, but you're actually getting rid of some kind of time servers who weren't very good at the military stuff, but just kind of felt that it was their duty to do it. So you tend to keep the cream of the military crop as officers, and the administrators administrate, so the government actually gets better. So so you can pick all these things. Now, sometimes when you're in campaign, you are rolling to try and push the other guy back. You're doing this. This represents skirmishes, raids against his supplies, seizing of important bridges and so on, tons and tons and tons of minor skirmishes and so on. But it can sometimes turn into a major battle. And when that happens, you've got a tactical system. Boom, you lay out these things. You've got different sectors of the battlefield. Usually there's kind of 2 in the middle and 2 on the flanks. And you deploy troops. You decide from your resources what's going there. Now, if you have named military units, so for instance, you might have Cromwell's cavalry are very, very efficient, and they've got quite a high strength number on them, and they've got some extra bonuses. There's also the Ironsides, which are reformed parliamentary cavalry, also very efficient, very disciplined. The London trained bands are another one, quite a powerful infantry unit. You might get Hazelrig's Lobsters, a kind of powerful cavalry force. The Royalists have got the same. They've got like the Prince Rupert's cavalry. They're very dangerous. There are things like some of the Cornish foot and so on, which turn up. They're nasty. Parliament has some total shite units. Absolutely appalling, because what happens is the areas that aren't held down by your named units, you pull them randomly from a bag. I put down what infantry's in the centre, you're pulling it at random. And there's some appalling parliamentary units, because sometimes they just had to use whatever the local militia was. As you've got some abilities, you start getting the ability to like remove the crap counters from the mix. Are some of those abilities you can buy. Later on, when you decide to do something like establish the new model army, these named units are very, very powerful indeed. The Cromwell and Ironside cavalry, by the way, what's nice about those is how they actually aid in the battle. So anyway, you start out with cavalry on the flanks, and then what you do is essentially you just go nose to nose. You're rolling a d6. You're adding that to the number of the cavalry of the unit's strength, and if you beat the other guy by 2, then that is a victory. So he disappears, and you move that unit into the victory box to you got a victory. If you get an equivalent number, or you only exceed or lose by 1, it is a draw, and these things stay in the draw box. At the end, the battle is decided by how many counters you've got in the victory box versus the draw and defeat. If the majority of your counters are in the victory box, then it is a victory. If the majority are in the defeat box, it's a defeat. If the majority are in the draw box, it's a draw. What you can do is you can pull back some units that got a victory and pull them into draw. You might need to do this to change those numbers. Say if you've got 2 guys in the draw box and you've got 1 guy in victory, and you've got say 2 guys down in if you've got 2 guys down in the defeat box. Ooh, okay. Apparently defeat kind of trumps the ones that are in the draw box. But what you can do is say, I'm going to pull the victory guy, I'm going to pull him back to a draw. So now I've got more guys in the draw box than I've got in the other one. So it just counts as a general draw. So there's no particular disaster on either side. So that campaign just stalemates for now. It is risky to send in your named units. If you get a loss, then you can lose them. There are random stuff that comes up on the cards and so on, and little random things that run around, so you can get some little cute things. I like Prince Rupert's poodle is in there. Boy, the poodle. It's a random counter that does turn up, and if Boy is in play, and if Rupert's on the board with his cavalry, good. And he's got his poodle with him, they get a +1. Oh, curse that poodle. Yeah, so, quite a nice, simple battle system, but it works out very, very well. And this is how we proceed. You work your way through until you've gotten to the end of the event deck. At the end of that, you have a look at where the political markers are, and that tells you how good a victory it is. You can just stop there, or you can go on to the next civil war. How well you did will affect your setup for the next civil war. And there's a little thing at the back that tells you, given the kind of victory points that you got through the course of all this thing, how well did you do? What was the effect on future history and so on? It's like, well, you guys, you dissolved into a military dictatorship almost immediately. So you kind of showed that republicanism is just, essentially just a way for crazed maniacs to take power. So people kind of shied away from that. So American revolutions and so on, there was finally some revolts there, but that got delayed. So there was finally a free America, but it wasn't until the 1820s. And, so it does these kind of cute little future history things. This is a good game. It's, again, like a lot of these kind of board games, it can confront you a bit by having sort of all these maps and charts. Not too many. Like I showed you, there's not much to those rules. The things to keep track of is the political chart. How well am I doing? Your zeal points. At the end of each turn, you gather zeal for owning areas, owning London, owning Bristol, owning Oxford, all these sorts of things. You get them for having mighty military victories, and you get them for achieving certain things, like you've managed to push back the Scots and so on. Yay, the populace loves it, etc. And so the zeal points, purchasing the abilities, which allows you to change the armies and, again, meddle with the political tracks. This is important. A good little game. And again, it's one you could just set up on a table and just keep coming back to it. Play a couple of months of it one evening, come back a couple of evenings later and see how you're going. It's a pretty good, simple sim of the English Civil War, because what it's largely about is attitudes and politics. The military stuff is really just keeping you head above water as you're trying to change the way people think. And, accept the fact that if there isn't a king, the crops will still grow. Americans take note. Anyway, it's been a good find. It's nice to see, and I want to see more from those designers. I think they could do some good work. So anyway, take a look at it. If you're an English Civil War fan, it's kind of a must. If you're just a general kind of historical board game thing, it's a good solo game. It really is. And it's a long one. It's one that you can keep going if you want to keep doing like those 3 campaigns, one after another. Or you can just do do a quickie. Anyway, if you've enjoyed the reviews, by all means, like, subscribe, find me on Patreon. And yeah, tell people about the channel, and I will keep hunting out some cool stuff so that I can break it down for you and show what it all is. Cheers, everybody, and happy Pride, folks. Cheers.